Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, Writers on Their Own Words, the show where every week I talk to writers about their work and the publishing industry and anything else that happens to come to mind, but mostly how they do that really cool thing that they do. The show is available by the same name on both YouTube and via all of the major podcast platforms. And you can subscribe to either or both, which of course is my preference, so you never miss a thing. I'm going to come back to that too, because I am going to hit you up with the please leave me a review and a nice 5-star rating, all that stuff. It does help other people find the show. But I'll come back to that because right now I really want to get into it with my guest today. Gigi Pandian is the award-winning USA Today best-selling author of several different cozy mystery series, including the one I'm reading right now, The Accidental Alchemist Mysteries, The Secret Staircase Mysteries, the Jaya Jones, I hope I said that right, Treasure Hunt Mysteries, as well as a handful of locked room mystery short stories. She's also very active in the broader crime writing community, including being a co-founder, God, easy for me to say, along with Kellye, Garrett, and Walter Mosley, of the Crime Writers of Color group, which of course was founded to serve as a voice of support and encouragement for writers coming from underrepresented communities. She has a new Secret Staircase book, A Midnight Puzzle, that'll be coming out on March 19th, which is not too far off from when you'll be seeing this. And we're going to talk about that and much more here today with her. So, Gigi, thanks for being here today. Welcome to the Open Mic.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, good, good. Well, like I said, let's hop right into it because you do have a new book coming out, which I noted. Tell us all about A Midnight Puzzle.
A Midnight Puzzle is a secret staircase mystery about Tempest Raj. She is a former stage illusionist who, after her career on the stage is sabotaged, she has moved back home to Hidden Creek, a small town in Northern California, to be helping with the family business. And so she is feeling very much at loose ends, even though the family business, as all the rest of us would think, is pretty darn amazing. It is building things like sliding bookcases and secret libraries into private homes. So architectural misdirection instead of the misdirection that she used to create on stage. And A Midnight Puzzle is the third secret staircase mystery. They are all impossible crime mysteries. As you mentioned, I've written several locked room mysteries / impossible crime short stories, and the secret staircase mysteries are my way of bringing that to life in full-length novels because I love that subgenre of mystery. And so at the start of A Midnight Puzzle, Secret Staircase Construction is being sued by a former client for something that they did not do that led to the client's wife nearly dying on a fall down the stairs. But really, this guy was not up to no good. And so at midnight, Tempest receives a message from him to come meet him at this old theater that she has rented out. But instead, she finds him dead from an ingenious booby trap there. So that sets her down a rabbit hole of figuring out what happened to him. Is her family going to be blamed for this? And also a series of family secrets that are able to involve this theater and the secret staircase construction business. So as you can tell, it's still when we're talking, it's a little ways out from when the book comes out. And so we were just talking before we got started. I'm deep in revisions on book 4. And so I'm so in the world of secret staircase construction that it's really funny that I'm starting to talk about it. And I'm like, I've been for about 5 hours today editing the next book in the series when talking about this one, and they're so real to me. I'm like, where are they at this moment in time with this mystery? So there you go.
Well, that sounds great. And I'll say, I noted that you write several of these series, and I'm always so full of admiration for authors that can keep all these plates spinning at the same time. And I get it, maybe writing every bit of every series all at the same time, but still, how you keep all these things straight in your heads even because like I've talked with writers who've written maybe one series but over a long time, like over 10 or 12 years, and I've asked them if they ever found themselves repeating themselves, and it's happened to almost everybody where they said, God, that's a really great line or a great paragraph or a great, yeah, and it was really great the first time I used it back in 2004. How how do you manage to keep all of these different, very complex, very interesting, sometimes very humorous storylines all going and keep them straight in your head?
Well, for me, one of the reasons that I absolutely love writing on the cozier end of the mystery fiction spectrum is because I want to have fun hanging out with my characters. And I really love existing in that world. It makes it so fun. Even though writing is difficult, it's also I need it to be fun at the same time because it is so difficult. So if I get to hang out with these characters who I really wish were my friends, I love my friends in real life, but the characters, if I have properly brought them to life, then I want them to be real people that are friends in my life too. And I hope my readers will also feel like they want to hang out with the characters because they think of them as friends that they get to catch up with and following along with them in the mystery. And so I only work on when I'm only writing one project at a time. And so it overlaps right now that I'm working on book 4 while promoting book 3 in the series, but I'm only actively working on this one book. And so I have all of the characters in my mind. And one thing that is really great for this series that my publisher created this little series character Bible for me so that I can keep everything straight in the series, which I wish I had for other books too that I really need to go back and create. And so even though that doesn't protect against like writing the same witty line that I think is brilliant that I thought of 5 years ago, it at least helps me keep everything straight in case I forget something about the characters because I draft so much on paper that sometimes things that I write there that don't move their way onto the computer for a final version, I do forget if, like what the final version was versus what I was just brainstorming in my notebook. So definitely a
Right.
danger.
Yeah, I have I call it an outtakes file, and it is
Yeah.
almost as long as my latest manuscript. I mean, it is because look, I think you're talking about revisions, and I think it was Hemingway that said, good writing is rewriting, and so if you do this for long enough, you'll end up having vastly more stuff that is sitting on the side. And what makes
Yeah.
me, what I think of, I love Robert Plant's podcast, Digging Deep, and he's good in his intro, he talks about songwriting, and he says how, you brainstorm these ideas and you decide the ones you're going to use, and then which ones will go into the maybe later bag. And I've always remembered that because I think that's what so many writers do. You write something and you may love it, but maybe it doesn't work here, or there's some other thing, and you have to set it off to the side, but you don't want to lose it either. So, like I
Yeah.
say, I've got a file like it. Do you have files like that where you just like, oh, I can't make myself get rid of these words, but I can't use them here, so maybe somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I don't delete anything. So nothing is ever really gone, but it might be somewhere that I don't know where to find it, but I feel, at least I hope, that if an idea is good enough that that I'll at least remember enough to come back to it even if I can't find my initial notes in it. And as I mentioned, I'm really someone who writes a lot on paper. And so that really is frustrating sometimes if I'm going back and trying to find something, but I do feel like my ideas flow most freely if I'm writing on paper.
I'm really fascinated by that too, because I've talked to a lot of writers who do that. And you know, my first thought when I say that is, oh, maybe it's a certain age group, right? Because we grew up doing that or whatever, but it really isn't. I've talked to writers across the age spectrum who just feel comfortable writing out maybe a first draft, an entire first draft on paper. Do you do that much of your work by hand like that?
I don't do a whole first draft, but I'm never exactly sure how to talk about my different drafts because it's all so iterative that I'll fill at minimum 2 paper notebooks per novel. at minimum. But what's in there, some of it is dialogue and working through characters like that might actually end up in the final version. But much more of it is just exploring ideas for the book. So different elements, so different thematic elements, or how different clues might, turn into this twisty mystery. Since I do really love like the fair play puzzle plot type of mystery. And so really working out all of those elements, and just doing different character development type things. And so some books need more writing prose on paper than other books. It really depends on how the words are coming to me. So I'm just open to whatever is moving the story forward. If I feel like I'm stuck at the computer, then I'll go back to paper. If I feel like I've been writing too many ideas before I go back to actually turning that into a book, then I'll switch back to the computer. But so it really, my process is very, very messy. But if I try to cut corners, then it creates more work for me. So if I try to skip that notebook phase because I think, oh, I have a deadline that's, only, X number of months away, that let's see if I can just, skip certain parts of the process, but I can't at all.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because everybody's process is different, which I used to ask people a
Yep.
lot about their process on this show, but everybody's just so different and so unique. I think really the answer is everyone's just got to find their own, which it sounds like you really have. And clearly you've been successful. Um, but I want to slide back because I noted I'm reading The Accidental Alchemist right now, and I really love it.
Oh, thank you.
And I will say, I've only recently come to reading cozies or less than noir or hard-boiled crime fiction. That was my thing for the longest time, right? And so I'm really enjoying reading these somewhat softer or less, less brutal, I guess, maybe forms of
Yeah.
crime fiction. And I find myself really enjoying your sleuthing team of Zoe Faust and her living gargoyle, Dorian. I don't think I'm giving away anything to anyone who hasn't read it. You should read these books and you'll understand. But I understand there's a little bit of a story behind how that series came to be and how those characters came to be. Can you share that with us here?
Yeah, so I never imagined that my Accidental Alchemist Mysteries, about a centuries old alchemist and her living gargoyle sidekick, would be read by other people besides me. Because it's such a wild idea. I had never written anything with fantasy elements before The Accidental Alchemist. But I've always loved reading mysteries that have fantasy elements, but I just didn't think that within the traditional mystery world, it didn't seem like something I would write. But then shortly after my 36th birthday, I was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. And that came out of nowhere. I had no family history, that turned my life completely upside down in many ways. And I made many choices in life from that point. I had a whole year of cancer treatments ahead of me. So there was many different things that I decided were important for me to do that year, not knowing, what the future outcomes would be. But one of the things I did was I've always been someone who loves NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And because it helps you just get the words on the page and fast draft a novel in 30 days, like a full draft of a novel. And so while I was going through chemotherapy, I thought, I'm just going to write a book that is 100% for me. All of my books are for me, but like that one, I was like, it doesn't matter how wild it is. I'm just going to write these things that not even thinking about anything else. And so because I was going through chemo, which is my own elixir of life at the time, I was like, I need to write this alchemist character who had accidentally discovered the elixir of life. And because I've always been fascinated by gargoyles, that's just one of my things. I've always, since I was a kid, whenever I've seen gargoyles, I've just always taken photographs of them. So I have a whole body of work of gargoyle photos and things. And so I thought, I'm going to write this living gargoyle, and he's really a wacky, humorous character, and he's a French chef, and all of these elements that I just personally loved. And they don't, if you, when you write them on paper, they don't make sense together. But I think because I was just writing from the heart and, writing these characters, that they just came to life in some way. And so when I showed my pages to my agent, like I didn't think that this anything would come of this, but she loved it. And that I had to clean up the book a lot from, that early draft. But that was my series that sold the most quickly of anything, because there was something there that, because I was writing from this dark place, but writing like a fun, humorous thing where I was just able to channel something, it ended up working. And luckily, I've been able to keep channeling those characters over the years, even though I've been cancer-free for more than a decade now, thankfully. But that whole experience that really showed me the importance of writing what you love and not thinking about. I mean, I have to think about my readers from a certain, point of view, because otherwise I would, write really grammatically messy things just to get the story down, so like I have to do that. But I think the importance of really telling my own unique story and writing things that I love, that showed me the importance of doing that, to be both personally fulfilling and to have it be satisfying for readers as well.
I think that's such a great point. And I I think everybody that is new to writing and trying to sell writing, it's natural to maybe feel like you're chasing what's hot to some extent, even if you don't know you're doing it. But I've talked with so many writers who did that and had no success, and ultimately just ended up writing the thing they wanted to write, and that's where they had success.
Yeah.
And it feels like to me too, I mean, there's so much stuff that comes around all this. So, there's all these rules that, especially in mystery, uh, and each subgenre of mystery, whether it's, cozy, whether it's noir, whether it's, buddy mystery, whatever the thing, there's all these rules you have to follow. And we think, oh, you have to do that. And then you read somebody, like for me, it was reading Don Winslow or people like that, and you go, well, he's breaking every rule I'm being told not to break. But that's the ticket, right? If you do it really well,
Yeah.
you can do anything. And
Yeah.
so I think everything that you just said is such a great lesson for writers to remember, that the biggest part of all this is loving the thing you write and loving your characters and loving the story, and because that does come across. My very long-winded lead-in way of saying, my brother-in-law is really big into gargoyles for some reason, because there's no other thing that would ever indicate that he would be into gargoyles, but he's really likes gargoyles. And
Gargoyles are the best. Of course, you should love gargoyles.
yes, and we've been to Notre Dame a few times, and of
Yep.
course we always have all these pictures of the gargoyles. So as I'm reading this, the, how to describe Dorian without giving away too much? I will just say my first thought of Dorian was a little effete, a little. You very much caught that, but so endearing, right? You don't have to read very far. He's fussy and all these things that you maybe think of with a French chef, but he's also very endearing. He's very smart, and his heart is very much in the right place most of the time, it seems like anyway. So I thought that was really enjoyable, right? That's why I really strongly suggest, if you like cozies at all, check out the series, because it's really a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the one series that I hear from so many readers, that with what is meant to be a compliment, and I do take it as a compliment, but I think it's really funny that they'll say, I would never read anything like this, but my friend handed it to me and said I had to read it, and I fell in love with it, and so it's really funny to me that yeah, that people who wouldn't necessarily read a fantasy mystery on the cozier end of the mystery spectrum, that Dorian still gets lots of them, so gets him hooked.
Absolutely. Well, you know that your parents are cultural anthropologists, and that you spent a lot of your youth traveling around the world with them on various ventures. And I'm curious, how did that influence your writing, whether it was, in the stories you craft, or just the interest in being a storyteller, or any other way?
Yeah, so I'm an only child. And so when my parents would take them with me on their research trips, sometimes there would be other kids around, but often there wouldn't be. And so I would just be left to my own devices to explore interesting places and find my own entertainment. So if I was with, for example, they decided I went to lots of United States based academic conferences with my parents when I was like really little. So traveling for things like that and different academic appointment things they did. But when I was 10 years old was when I started traveling with them internationally. And we would do a lot more of that. But so that first summer when I was 10, that my mom was updating one of her academic research books. So she was spending the whole summer in the Highlands of Scotland. And so as a little kid, it was like safe enough for me to go running around, places while she was doing that. And so I would just go like climb all these ruined castles and, talk to all of these people about things and find in little secondhand bookshops, all of these mythology, folklore books and like of little stories that I could read at that age. And I always have been drawn to mysteries and stories. Growing up in a house full of books, and that was the genre that I was really drawn to. So I did at that age even start making up stories to entertain myself. And also the idea of being I always felt comfortable places because they took me so many places from when I was young. So even being an outsider, I was very comfortable being in that outsider position, looking in and be able to see things. And so that's why I think I write a lot of my fiction is um, someone who is like my first series, like the Jaya Jones Treasure Hunt mysteries, that Jaya is able to go to different countries and go on all of these different adventures, but she is a professor in California. And so it's from her perspective there, but she's able to dig into things when she's traveling. And so I've always loved cross-cultural connections and be able to create adventurous stories that are really fun, but with an eye towards something to do with cross-cultural connections.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And you mentioned the Highlands. I was in the Highlands many years ago, and to me, that's the beauty of an old bookstore in London or Paris or just some small pub in the Highlands. I mean, how could you not get story ideas in your head? There's just so much history and mystery and everything all around you. That's
Yeah, yeah.
fabulous that you got that experience as a child, because we're when we're kids we're sponges. It's all just being absorbed in our throughout our entire psyche, I think, so that's great. What a fabulous experience, and what a great way to grow up.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm very fortunate, but I also kick myself that I didn't appreciate it enough at the time,
Right.
So, like in India, like with my dad and stuff, and the things that I found frustrating that I didn't have there, that I had at home. And I'm like, I wish I had, because you take for granted all the time that you have when you're younger to do these things. And now I'm like, man, I can only carve out a couple weeks to go do these things. So, yeah.
Right. Right. Well, speaking of that, something else that is a focal point of a lot of your books is cooking. You love to cook. Food and recipes are parts of several of your works. Um, and somewhere in there, I've also seen you refer to yourself as an accidental vegan. So I also love to cook. I'm a big cook, and so that caught my attention. But the accidental vegan part, please explain that and
Oh,
share a bit
yes.
more about how, cooking and recipes play into your work.
Yes. So when I got my cancer diagnosis, I've always been a big foodie, and that was one of my favorite things about traveling was trying all the different foods wherever I went. But so when I got my cancer diagnosis, I ended up with my particular situation, I had some food restrictions, but I didn't want to give up eating wonderfully. And so what I ended up doing was I took a bunch of cooking classes then when I was recovering from chemo. And in the years that followed, I've really taken so many cooking classes and gone really deep into learning how to cook from scratch. And so I figured out with my like few, food restrictions, but, wanting to eat every bit as wonderfully, I became I'm an accidental almost vegan because I'm not strict about it, but but most of my cooking that I do from scratch at home, that's a great way to be able to cook things that can be that work for both me and anyone who I'm cooking for. And it tastes every bit as great and I feel great eating, the things that I know what foods I'm, what ingredients I'm putting into things. And so it was just really fun and also therapeutic for me to learn, like both emotionally and physically, to be able to, learn this thing that like felt great and was really enjoyable. And it's cooking is so much fun. I mean, I've always been so into food, but it wasn't until that experience that I really learned how to cook from scratch. And yeah, and so I love it. And so I love recipe testing too. And it's great that I write things that since I have characters who cook, so I'm able to play with recipes that I can put in the books. And so that's been a lot of fun. And then I get to have my husband and friends be recipe testers. So yeah.
Well, I noticed in some of your reviews that people mention it, and that the correspondence that I see people sending you, they ask, "Oh, are you going to keep including recipes and these stories?" And it's clearly a way to connect with your audience. I mean, it's still part of the story, but it's also a part of you, and it's really feels like a great way to connect with your audience to where they feel that connection with you as the storyteller, but also with you as the person. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like just a great way to share something with your audience that is not just I complain to people all the time that if all you ever do on social media or whatever is say buy my book, it drives me crazy, right? Don't do that because you need to have some kind of connection with readers. That's a great way to do it without by just including it right there in the stories, right? Because so many people do, I think, love to cook. So that's a great way to do it.
Yes, recipes and gargoyle photos.
Right? Absolutely. Well, we noted you're also a fan of magicians and locked room mysteries, and I had the author Tom Mead on the show a
Yeah.
while back, and I had not been a locked room person. I hadn't really experienced that. And from the time he'd been on the show, and of course his book at that time was I think it was Death and the Conjurer.
Yeah, that was his debut.
Um, since then, I'd also done one of those locked room things that you can do now where everybody can get together in be in an actual locked
Oh,
room.
an escape room.
And so yeah, escape room, thank you. So now I'm a lot more in tune with it. So tell me a little bit about what draws you to those.
Yeah, so this is actually, I'm going to start with a little bit of a tangent answer before circling back to that, because this comes full circle to writing what you love, even when it's not popular. It's only in the last few years that Impossible Crime, Locked Room Mysteries have been getting more resurgence in readership in the crime fiction world. But it was a type of mystery that was really popular in the golden age of the detective fiction about a century ago. But I always loved it. And so when I started writing more than a decade ago, I still really wanted to do this. And so I worked on lots of locked room mystery short fiction while I was becoming a good enough writer to write it into novel length fiction. But it wasn't something that it was just like this in the corner thing. Yeah, yeah, that's what Gigi likes to do in her spare time when she's not writing these other novels. But now it's actually popular, so I'm thrilled that I get to do it in my Secret Staircase Mysteries, and I'm even more thrilled that authors like Tom Mead are and lots of other folks who are really bringing the genre back into the public eye, because I love having more of these stories to read. But so I got into magic and impossible crime novels when I was a teenager and looking at classic mysteries that I either found in secondhand bookshops or a few of them that my mom had on her fiction bookshelves as well. And those were the ones that were my absolute favorites. So John Dixon Carr, who is the master of the locked room mystery, who is a contemporary um, of Agatha Christie and all of those great Golden Age writers. Um, he is the epitome of this style of mystery because a locked room mystery, which is often used as a synonym for an impossible crime, and I think of them as the same, but the difference is a locked room mystery is when there is a crime that takes place inside a locked and sealed room, but it looks like there's no way for it to have actually happened because it looks like it could only have been done by a ghost because there's no way for anyone to get in and out, but here is someone who's dead of a gunshot wound and it couldn't have been self-inflicted. And an impossible crime is some other situation, but that's not inside a locked room, but is very similar, like footprints in the snow, but there's only one set of footprints. So how was this person killed? But you're in the wide open. But so they're effectively the same thing. And for me, they are the ultimate puzzle. And so they are just so mysterious because it's not only that you're trying to figure out who done it, but how in the earthly realm, without any supernatural intervention, that this was even possible. And John Dixon Carr was so brilliant at it because in addition to creating super clever puzzles, he also brought in this macabre gothic atmosphere that looked like that it could only be a supernatural hand, that it's a curse or it's a ghost or something, that is this supernatural entity that is super creepy or a vampire or something like that. And so you get this amazing gothic ghost story along with the most puzzling of puzzle plot mysteries. And that's just so fun. It's just such a fun type of book to read. So I was always so into reading those. And magicians were a lot more common in the Golden Age books than they were until very recently, but now there's a bunch of magicians coming back, which is awesome. But in those Golden Age books, magicians are the perfect character to solve impossible crimes because they create the impossible on stage. So that's why I created Tempest Raj, who I first wrote into an impossible crime short story, and she wouldn't be quiet, so I needed to do more with her. But she's a stage illusionist, and so that's why she's great at solving impossible crimes. So I really get to think about these puzzles that I love reading. It's so much fun to create them.
Well, that's great. Like I say, I made me think too, it's even with movies now, we're seeing the Knives Out movies and
Yeah, yeah.
know, yeah, it's fun stuff. It's challenging stuff. It's not again not as someone who read everything Tony Hillerman ever wrote and everything Walter Mosley ever wrote and all the noir writers and everything. It's nice sometimes to read those because they're still murders, crimes, but they're not quite as doom and gloom, right? There's just more of a fun mind working element to them, and so yeah, they're a lot of fun actually. So I just mentioned Walter Mosley, and as I noted in the intro, you and Kellye Garrett and Walter are co-founders of Crime Writers of Color. Um, Tell me a little bit more about that. What inspired you to become part of this, and how do you see the industry now in terms of its attitudes toward diversity with writers?
I am so thrilled with how the crime fiction landscape looks now compared to even when I started just a little over a decade ago in terms of the breadth of amazing books by all sorts of writers that are out there, which is just so fantastic to have so many amazing books out there. So this was something, it's so funny how big Crime Writers of Color has grown. It's so much more beyond any expectations that any of us had, at least me and Kellye, who we've talked about this many times. So Kellye and I shared a publisher when her debut novel, Hollywood Homicide, was coming out. And I was so excited to learn from our shared editor about her book that there was this humorous, lighthearted mystery by a Black author with this Black main character because this was still, I love, mystery fiction of all kinds, but didn't see many other characters and authors who had backgrounds similar to my own. And so I thought that that was great that there was more diverse voices that were here. And so I got an advance copy of her book and was able to meet her for coffee, and we really hit it off. And we were both talking about this idea that we didn't know a lot of other authors of color in the mystery community. We knew a couple people, so we thought, that would be great to be able to share resources and network and hear about each other's experience of things. And so we just started an informal listserv, and Kellye had been on a panel with Walter, and they had had a similar conversation. So she was really Kellye Garrett. She is the heart and soul of the group. And if anyone in the mystery community is listening to this, you know this already. So she really so she was the focal point of it, but we were all talking about how, to bring this together. But so we all just invited folks that we knew and just created a listserv and just thought we would be able to, talk and, see what people's experiences were in, and so it started with about 30 people. And now we have about 400 people. And so these aren't all published authors. This is people at all stages of their careers, but it's really just fantastic how much it's grown in the group, but also in the publishing landscape, that there are so many great diverse books that are fantastic reads across all the different mystery subgenres. So it's really fun to see.
Yeah, well, along those lines, of course, we're talking about Kellye Garrett, and Kelly's very vocal too, and definitely is someone who will speak up when she sees things that need to be spoken about. I know there was some controversy over BoucherCon this year, and some of the featured guests and interviewers, and um, and I think that's great. I really do, because that is so important that somebody be that person. So, what more along those lines? What more do you think the industry could do in this area? It sounds like you feel like they've really improved, but what more could the industry do in this area? And maybe what more could fellow writers do, to try to help their fellow writers who are maybe, not getting the fairest of shakes. I mean, like I say, maybe it's better now, but I don't think anyone thinks it's completely equitable. So,
Right,
what
right,
do you?
right. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that in terms of the industry, I do think, even though it's really wonderful to see the books that have been published, I am optimistic, but it hasn't yet played out, that I hope that this is not just a trend. And so something that publishers are doing because it's a trendy thing, that, get a bunch of authors, so that they're not going to support. So I really hope that publishers continue to support diverse authors who are writing in all across the spectrum of the genre, because it does take, there are very few people who break out and become a huge success immediately. And so it does take time. And so I hope that publishers aren't just saying, oh, well, we tried this author and they didn't become a super bestseller after, a very short time. And so they had their chance. Bye bye. So I hope that that doesn't happen in the future. I hope that this is something that publishers continue
Right.
to give authors a chance. And so, like with my own career, I am someone who started small and have grown over the years, but it's taken time to do. And so I'm very pleased with the place that I'm in now, but it didn't. I've always been happy in the journey and in the place where I am, but it's not like I was an immediate breakout success, because it does take time to build a career. And there's a small percentage of authors who might break out and become bestsellers immediately, but that's not the norm. And I don't think it has to be the norm for a good career as an author.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave this though. What do you think other writers can do? And maybe it's this, because I mentioned that Kelly's very vocal, and again, I think that's great. But I see a lot. She gets a lot of support sometimes when she's very vocal, and sometimes she also gets a lot of pushback. And so I mean, is that the thing that other writers could maybe do the best for each other is just support writers who are willing to go out and stick their face into the buzzsaw, so to speak?
I like it's so interesting that you were because I didn't so I in terms of my own life balance and mental health, I am not a big social media person. That is not where I am. And so I haven't been on, like, I left Twitter like a year ago. And so I'm involved in people on a more like I'm in the mystery community, but more with the author relationships that I have, as opposed to I feel like so much of social media is not real life. And so I don't know how to sift through everything there. And so I'm not really a big social media person. And so I have multiple writers groups and yeah, and I'm involved in the one-on-one relationships with authors and I love to support new authors. So I've been lucky to have great mentors and I like to mentor authors as well. And so I wonder if that's something too that I know that Sisters in Crime is trying out a new mentorship opportunity that I read about, and there are different opportunities to do things like that. So I think I know lots of people do lots of things on social media, but for me, I would rather reach out to people to mentor them from the place where I am. So I think in terms of I don't think that there's just one type of thing that authors can do to support other authors, but it's whatever, people in their own lives are, able to do. So that might be for people who are active on social media, that might be elevating issues or authors. But then for people who aren't on social media, it could be more reaching out to authors who they see struggling or that they might be able to mentor or do other things for. And then the thing that everybody can do is buy books or request books at your local library. So show the publishers that these are books you want to read. And so none of us can afford to buy every single book out there, but if you can't afford to, buy everything you want to read, it's also great for authors to request books at the library and check out books from the library because then the library will order more of that author's books. So there are so many different ways to support authors, I think.
Yeah, simple ways, simple ways. And I hope everybody heard that last bit because the library is such a fabulous resource, right? And so, of course, every author wants you to go out and buy their book and preferably in hardcover, right, when it's brand new. But hey, look, wherever you're buying it, buy books. Um, Help writers get discovered. And that's probably the last serious question I'll ask you here is discoverability. It's such a challenge, and in a way, I was actually going to ask this differently, but you addressed social media already, so thank you for that. But it
Mhm.
reminded me that actually the bigger issue, I think, for every writer is the discoverability part of this game. There was a time for quite a long time where self-publication and indie publication was really looked down upon. That's not true anymore. So there's a lot of really good writers who are going the indie route and self-publishing. The the big five has been shrunk way down. I think it used to be about the big 10. Now it's about the big four. Um, all of which comes out to mean there's just so much competition out there, right? And trying to get people to even know your book is out there. As I have said to people, I read probably more than most people do for obvious reasons. I need to do this show, but also just because I'm a huge reader. And I'm still discovering new writers all the time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's just part of the game. And so, how do you, if you're not big on social media, which by the way, nobody should blame you for that because it is a cesspool most of the time. How do you go about making yourself discoverable, so that you do catch that person's attention and they say, hey, that Alchemist book or that Locked Room book, I'm not familiar with this author. I think I want to check her out. How do you have a marketing plan that you utilize in that regard?
So everybody, like all authors have a different story in how their books get discovered and what they want to do. So for me, um, and also depending on when your career starts, you'll reach people in different ways. And so For me, the two main things that I focus on right now are writing the best books that I can write, because I really do feel like only I can write the books that I'm writing. I'm not writing to market. I'm not writing, a particular, like I'm not, yeah, I feel like I'm writing, my books are quirky, which is, the double-edged sword that I feel like my books can take longer to catch on, as my career started slowly before it grew, it has to catch on, slowly before it can grow more. But then when people discover my books, I do feel like I get more lifelong readers, because my books do stand out to the people who love them. They're going to stick with me for my career. So I feel like I've been growing, at the slow and steady pace, that has, some moments that are, bigger steps than others, for the last decade. And so I focus on my readers by in my email newsletter list. And so I've just grown that organically over the years. And because I do write locked room mystery short stories and love doing recipes, when people sign up for my email newsletter, they get one of my locked room mystery stories that they can't read anywhere else. And they get a mini cookbook of my recipes, both as ebooks. And so, because those are both things that if people like my books, these are things that they'll like. And then, so I grow my email list so people can, and I share book recommendations every month, because I'm a super avid reader too, across all different types of books. And so I'll share book recommendations each month, and often recipes or various things, so that, and then I do have, when I have books coming out, I'll share that stuff too. But I really do focus on, I stay off social media because it is such a time suck, and I would rather be enjoying my life and writing the best books I can write. And so I can't spend a lot of time on social media. And so I nurture other types of relationships. And so I guess I would just say it is tempting to feel like you need to be doing it all as an author. And it was a silver lining of having cancer very early in my career, that I'm like, I don't care about the things that don't matter. Like, life's too short. I'm not going to worry about these things that don't matter. And so if people are getting stressed out and upset about something on social media, like I can't, I just can't, It's so like,
Kudos.
that's not where I want my life to be. I want it to be in the real world here, or with my fictional characters. I was more involved in it too when I was first finding the mystery community and finding my group of my writers group and different things like that. And I also go to mystery conventions because I love connect. It's, it is solitary. So I love getting to go connect with my fellow mystery people, readers, and other writers at mystery conferences. That's so much fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to that because I think we'll both be at Left Coast Crime.
Oh, yes, yes.
I was
I'll look
just
forward to
looking at
seeing you there.
panels, and you're on a panel where I looked at it today and I realized every person on this panel has been on my show. You're the final one. You're the last one. So now everybody that's
Nice.
on, you're on with Jim Latwell, Tracy Clark, Libby Fleischman, and one other. Oh my gosh. Well, maybe I do have it up here. Let me just take a, no, do I? I do. Bear with me one second. There's one other
Is
person.
that's the Lefty Best Novel nominees one? So we
Yes,
also got
Matt Coyle. Matt Coyle's the other one.
oh, is
So
he coming now? Yay. Okay.
he says he's on the panel. So I
Okay,
will,
cool.
at some point when you guys are all up there, I'll stand up and wave at you, But okay.
Nice, nice.
Well, big kudos on this on the perspective on social media too, because I know a lot of writers feel such pressure to be on it. But honestly, I think what you said is so important for people to understand. The connection with your readers and with your fellow authors and whoever else does not have to be on the most negative cesspool forum in the world. There's lots of ways to do it. It may take a little more work, but I mean, I've asked writers that question, like, why are you on Twitter if you hate it so much? And they say, well, it's the only way I can connect with my readers. And I think, really, that doesn't seem right because writers were connecting with readers long before social media came around. So, but anyway, I digress. I I like to end on a fun question. You
Yes.
know this. So you know what's coming. Anyone who's paid any attention to the show knows what's coming. I'm about to give you I'm about to play the omnipotent literary overseer of the world and say I can put you together with one of these three people, maybe for a really good home cooked meal. Uh, which one would you choose and why? And the options that I'm going to give you are, and there's a little bit of a theme. You'll probably see it right off. The great Harry Houdini, Sir Isaac Newton, or Cleopatra, the great Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. I can put you together with one of them. Who would it be and why?
Okay, I'm gonna have to do Houdini. I think that that's the obvious answer here for anyone who knows me. But I love. I mean, this was such a hard question because I love historical research. Like I go down the rabbit hole of historical research so much. I have so many research books. I read so many things. I love. I mean, I need another lifetime to go become a proper historian. But Houdini's life and death, there are so many fascinating things in terms of his history, his life, and the mysteries that still surround his life and death. That would just be so amazing. And how he was able to achieve, like he was such a great showman. I just think it would be so um amazingly entertaining. But I think that Dorian, my gargoyle character, would object to this because in the books, this is not a spoiler for the Alchemist books, but in my Alchemist books, Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, who is the father of modern stage magic, who Houdini named himself after Robert Houdin. So Robert Houdin was the magician who accidentally brought Dorian to life using a book of alchemy that he thought was a mere stage prop, but turned out to contain real alchemy in there. And so Robert Houdin would be somebody else who I would love to have at that dinner party, another famous magician from
Well,
history. But yeah, Houdini's life, and there's so many books written about it. I have so many of them too, and it just gets the more I read, the less I know. It's just so fascinating.
that would be a long dinner party, I think, by the time you're done there. You would keep him around as long as you could, I'm sure.
Oh,
Well, yeah,
yes.
and of course the theme there, of course, Sir Isaac Newton, who we all know is for his brilliant scientific mind, was also something of an alchemist,
Yes. Yes, he
was,
was.
as was Cleopatra.
Hmm.
So there's our thread. So that, like I said, probably obvious. Anyway, Gigi Pandian. God, I knew I was going to say it wrong at some point. Pandian, right?
Pandian, yes. Thank you.
Okay. It is a given. This is one of those things. Um, so I have, my last name is spelled different than anyone else in the world, right? No one else spells Eisen the way I do. And I always knew when I was getting called on because whether they start struggling with the name, I knew they meant I'm the Richard they were trying to reach. So I'm so sensitive to it, and yet I do it all the time. And I do TV, and I do radio, I do this, and I still screw people's names up. So I apologize to any and all people whose names I have screwed up in my life. I swear it's some missing synapse up here. I don't know what that is. But anyway, Gigi, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been a real fun conversation to have. Love the books. Really glad I discovered them. Having a great time with The Accidental Alchemist. I can't wait to read more of them. I highly encourage anybody out there, if you haven't discovered Gigi's work, please check it out. It's really worth it. You're a fabulous writer. They're fun, they're interesting, they're thought-provoking. Can't ask for anything more than that out of a good book, right? So go check it out. I highly recommend it. And really, also, thanks for sharing a lot of really good insight for aspiring authors or wherever anyone's at in their career. I think you have a lot of wise perspectives on how to enjoy this game because it's hard.
Yes,
Writing's hard.
and anyone who is listening who is writing, do not wait for an unexpected cancer diagnosis to go ahead and write the book that you want to write and ditch the book promo things that you don't want to do. So just do it. Don't wait to have to get that gut check. So
Absolutely. Well, that dovetails very nicely into, how the same thing I say every week. I'm going to say two things. The first one is the benign one, which is Please, if you haven't hit subscribe, please do so. Leave a review. It's really helpful for other people to find the show. But to what Gigi was just saying, what I say every week, tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So please, whatever your passion is, follow it, make today count. For myself, for my guests, Gigi Pandian, myself, Rich Eisen, for my crazy setter dogs who are around here somewhere, and everyone else. This has been the open mic. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.